Hello, Foxhole community, and welcome to, well, this currently stands as the only novice guide for tanking in Foxhole. The purpose of this video is to cover information about tanking in Foxhole that is typically not included in the beginner's guides. For the purposes of illustration, I'll be using the website Foxhole Planner. I haven't seen anyone else do this before, so please be sure to leave a comment telling me whether you like it, or if I should use in-game footage instead. Please keep in mind that for the purposes of illustration, nothing is to scale. But with that out of the way, let's get into the video. In Foxhole, most tank crews are composed of 3 individuals. These are the commander, gunner, and driver. When it comes to who's in charge of the tank, the commander is the one who calls the shots. This is because the commander is the most visually aware crew member. This is then followed by the gunner, because they are the second most visually aware crew member. And last is the driver, because they can't see anything. If the tank is damaged, someone needs to get outside and repair it. The first one out should be the commander, as they are technically the most expendable crew member. If the driver and gunner stay in while the commander repairs, then this allows the tank to retaliate if it comes under fire and back away if necessary. If 2 crew members are needed to repair, then the driver should be the second one out. This allows the tank to still have some degree of visual awareness and the ability to retaliate if it comes under fire. Ideally, only 2 crew members need to be out repairing at a time. Only in dire circumstances do all 3 need to be out. If all 3 crew members are outside of the tank repairing, then this leaves the tank extremely vulnerable. When the commander gives an order to the crew, such as to move forward, it should be executed with as little delay as possible. The ability for a tank crew to operate seamlessly in combat can be the difference between life and death. If there's a delay in executing orders, then this loses the tank precious seconds in combat. Drivers and gunners should always listen attentively to their commanders. And the same goes in reverse. Commanders should always be willing to listen to input from their crew. Now let's move on to a fairly rudimentary scenario to give you a good idea of how a tank should operate. If an enemy is spotted, the commander must relay this information to the crew. This includes what type of enemy and what direction the enemy is in. In this scenario, it is a Devitt Ironhide. If the enemy is not directly in front of you, then the order should be immediately given to rotate the hull towards the direction of the enemy. This is because the armor at the front of the hull is stronger than that of the sides and rear. When this command is given, it should be simple and precise. Something along the lines of rotate hull northwest is typically very effective, as it is short, concise, and easy to understand. In addition to the hull, the main gun should also be rotated to help reduce reaction time. Much like rotating the hull, rotating the gun is also straightforward. The commander can either call out the general direction, such as northwest, or call out the specific azimuth. If the tank you are in comes under fire, it is the driver's job to monitor incoming fire and report it to the commander. Since the driver can't see anything beyond the tank itself, this is the only thing they're really good for aside from, well, driving and repairing. But make no mistake, this is a very important job. Since the gunner is busy engaging targets, and the commander is busy surveying the battlefield, the driver is the only position left that can fulfill this role. How this is done is quite simple. The driver looks at their tank and tells the commander whether or not an incoming round penetrated or bounced. It sounds simple enough, but it's very important. If the crew can take note of what types of rounds are hitting the tank and whether or not they penetrate, then this gives them a good idea of how much damage they take over time and whether or not to engage or disengage. Once again, when this kind of information is relayed, it should be short and concise. The driver should simply say that either a round penetrated or bounced. If your tank wishes to engage an enemy, then I have good news. This process is just as simple like the rest. First, the commander gives the order to the gunner. This includes which enemy unit to target and what subsystem to aim for. In this scenario, it's going to be the tracks of the Devitt Ironhide. Once the round has been sent down range, the gunner must do another crucial thing: relay whether or not the round has penetrated or bounced. as well as informing the crew whether or not the enemy's subsystems have been successfully disabled. It's basically the same thing as what the driver does, but in reverse. Now let's move on to what the commander does during combat. The commander is responsible for surveying the battlefield and identifying enemy units. This task sounds simple enough, but this requires a good knowledge of the game, from each individual tank and any other armored vehicles, all the way down to infantry weapons. This information can make all the difference on the battlefield. Knowing which units pose a bigger threat at any given time can be the difference between life and death. I strongly recommend that any new player reads the Foxhole official wiki. I'll leave a link to it in the description below. Anyways, back to the commander. When the commander is surveying the battlefield, he should survey all sides of the tank. This includes the front, the sides, and the rear. Surveying the rear is important. You never know if the enemy is going to try and sneak up behind you, or if friendlies are approaching to reinforce you. If friendly units are trying to reinforce you, then the commander should report this to their crew. This way, the gunner and driver can modify their behavior accordingly based upon what unit is trying to reinforce them. Surveying the front of the tank during combat may sound redundant. However, this is also very important. Is the tank you're engaging acting defensively or aggressively? How much armor does it have? Is this defensive or aggressive stance in accordance with how the tank is supposed to operate? What is it ultimately trying to do? These are the kinds of questions that the commander needs to be asking when surveying the front of the tank. The answers to these questions can be valuable in combat, and the commander should do their best to report them to the crew. In addition to this, the commander should also be looking out for enemy reinforcements, and what type of unit they are. This early warning is integral for the tank's survival. If the commander does not do this, then you'll be in for a nasty surprise. Monitoring the size of the tank is also important, and likewise, when doing so, the commander should also be asking certain questions. How are friendly units performing? Are they doing well, or are we about to be overrun and outmaneuvered? Are there large groups of enemy infantry that are not engaged with friendly units? As I said before, the commander should report this stuff, and the crew should modify their behavior accordingly. Now, I know what you're thinking. This all sounds a little daunting. And you're right, it is quite difficult. This is why I always recommend that the commander should be the most experienced crew member. An experienced crew member will do better at making the right calls and keeping the tank alive, or scoring kills if necessary. Now that we have the standard tank crew out of the way, let's look at tank crews that have 4 or more crew members. For this, we'll be using the mighty battle tank as an example, as it covers just about everything. The chain of command for larger tanks is similar, but it does have some key differences. Of course, the commander is first in command. This is followed by the main gunner, as they operate, well, the main gun. This is followed by the secondary gunner, or in this case, the battle tank's machine gunner. This is because they are the third most visually aware crew member. And at the bottom of the totem pole is the driver, for the same reasons as before. Now, there is a fifth role that's exclusive to battle tanks, with only 2 tanks currently being the exception, and that is the engineer. The engineer is in charge of loading the main gun and repairing the tank from the inside. When it comes to the chain of command, the engineer is below the driver. This is because, while though both have the same degree of visual awareness, they don't exactly have the same degree of agency. The driver, of course, drives the tank, moving it back and forth and whatnot. The engineer can only repair and load the main gun. So the driver is fourth and the engineer is fifth because the driver has a slightly more important role. With the chain of command out of the way, let's discuss what these 2 new crew members' jobs are. The job of the secondary gunner is simple, pretty much the same as the primary gunner. Their job is to engage targets based upon what type of munition their gun utilizes. In this case, the secondary gunner is a machine gunner with a machine gun chambered in 12.7. So their job is to primarily engage infantry and occasionally shoot at any light fortifications they come across. Just like with the primary gunner, the secondary gunner should always report back any important information. In this case, since they are a machine gunner, they should be relaying information based upon that role. This information includes how many targets they're engaging, how well entrenched they are, and if the gunner can even hit them, and whether or not they have AT weapons. Alright, with the secondary gunner out of the way, let's move on to the engineer. The engineer is a role that is exclusive to battle tanks, with only two other tanks being the exception. Their job is to repair the tank from the inside and reload the main gun. The first thing they do is monitor incoming fire and report if a shot has bounced or penetrated. When it comes to repairs, their job is pretty simple. They can repair the tank from the inside, and so they never have to leave the tank during combat. They can also see the health of the tank from the inside. Whenever the tank takes damage, it's their job to report it to the commander. The engineer is also the one who has to reload the main gun. The main gunner can't do it himself. During combat, it's up to the discretion of the commander to choose between reloading the main gun and doing light repairs on the tank, as both cannot be done at the same time. This is why it's important for the engineer to relay the health of the tank to the commander. This way, the commander can make the proper judgment calls on whether to reload the main gun or do light repairs on the tank. Alrighty, now that we've covered the roles of a tank, let's move on to a basic scenario to help you better understand how tanking works. In this scenario, we have a basic tank line. It's nothing too special. You'll see these all across the battles of Foxhole. When joining a tank line, there's one thing you need to consider. Where am I best suited? In this scenario, you're crewing a Spatha, a well-rounded and versatile tank. The tank line already has a Spatha on its far left, but it seems to be lacking one on its far right. So that's where you should go, to the far right of the tank line to help round out both sides. Now, let's quickly discuss who's in charge here. Tank lines can consist of one or two regiments working together with a clear leader commanding the group. However, from my experience, most tank lines tend to be a cabal of random individuals, operating whatever equipment they had available at the time. So, most of the time, there tends not to be any real leadership, just a common objective that everyone is trying to achieve. But there's no need to worry. Tank lines always have a de facto leader of some kind. This leadership operates on one of two key principles. The first principle is that the biggest is in charge. Whoever is commanding the biggest tank, or the one that is most crucial to the objective, is the one who is in charge of the tank line and gets to call the shots. The second principle is whoever assumes the leadership position is the one who gets to lead the tank line. Whoever is giving the most good advice, whether that be on what units to attack, what to defend, or how the tank line should operate, tends to be a de facto leader. Players in this game tend to listen to those who give good counsel on what should be done, so those people tend to end up in de facto leadership positions. This also means that with enough experience and practical knowledge, one day you might end up leading a tank line. But for now, let's keep focusing on the basics. I'll cover leadership in later videos. So here we have the commanding tank in green and your tank in blue. In a tank line, it's always your responsibility to protect and support those around you. You shouldn't worry about every tank in the line though, just the ones near you. Those being the two on your left and the two on your right. Anyone beyond that is typically outside of your reach. There isn't much you can do for them. If you really had to, you would have to break formation, and this could cause a lot of unnecessary chaos that the tank line does not need. Alright, so now let's cover what you need to do if your teammates need help. If one of the tanks in your section of the line comes under fire, it's your responsibility to retaliate against their aggressors and protect them however possible. Protecting friendlies is pretty simple. What you need to do is move your tank's hull in front of theirs and block incoming shots. From there, they can reverse and you can reverse with them. Once you have both gotten back to safety, be sure to help your allies repair. The faster they can get back in the fight, the faster you can. Now that we've covered that, let's move on to other aspects of working effectively in a tank line. During combat, the leader of the tank line will give out basic orders, such as to attack or defend. When you receive such orders, be sure to always execute them to the best of your ability. Failure to do so can hamper the tank line's combat effectiveness, thus leading to its ultimate destruction. When the leader says to move forward, all units should do so. There should be little to no hesitation. If there is hesitation, then this risks the tank line staggering and breaking formation, which leaves some units at risk to be picked off by the enemy. Okay, now we've covered the rudimentary stuff, let's move on to some other things. Let's start by addressing the enemy tank line. The enemy tank line will have its respective leader, much like your own. There's no way to confirm which tank it is. However, you can make an educated guess based on the two principles of leadership I mentioned earlier. With this information, we have reason to suspect that it's the enemy Flood Mark I battle tank highlighted in green. Identifying the enemy tank line's leader is important. If you can knock them out of the fight, then this can leave the enemy tank line disorganized for a period of time. This can leave many enemy units vulnerable and easy to pick off. There is also your section of the enemy tank line. These are the enemy units that you are primarily responsible for engaging and observing. It's quite similar to how you protect your friendlies in your tank line. You don't have to concern yourself too much with every enemy unit in the line, just the ones that are immediately in front of you. When engaging an enemy tank line, it's always good to know what friendly units are around you and how you can accommodate them. Let's take the Bardiche for example. The Bardiche is in its most ideal position, on the end of the right side of the tank line. In order for it to engage the enemy, it needs to hook around and flank the enemy tank line. Otherwise, it risks getting hit by the enemy's guns. Its target would be the enemy Kingspire, the small tank across from the Bardiche. If you want the Bardiche to score its kill, you would need to assist it. You would start by engaging the enemy Devitt that is across from you. Then, the Pelakes to your left would engage the enemy Silverhand. And from there, the rest of the tank line would pick appropriate targets. It's important to note that scoring kills is not a guarantee in tanking. Sometimes you'll have to try again or simply just wait. If you don't get your target, then that's okay. Just stay calm and fight on. Don't get wrapped up in trying to score kills, just focus on the greater objective. I've seen way too many tankers try to go for the glory and get a kill. This causes them to become very short-sighted, which usually ends up with them becoming severely damaged or completely destroyed. Don't count kills and don't count hours. Only count the number of times someone has told you that you've done a good job. From there, tanking becomes a lot simpler and a lot easier. Okay, bits of wisdom out of the way, let's get back to the scenario. When friendly units approach to reinforce you, there are two things that are going to happen. The first thing the friendly unit is going to do is, well, join formation. If there's a gap wide enough in the line for them to squeeze into, they'll usually take it. However, in this scenario, there isn't a gap wide enough for the Kreneska to fit. So the leader of the tank line gives an order for the Kreneska to move into your side of the line. You and the Bardiche have to shuffle over a little bit to make some room. But don't worry, this is a very common occurrence on the battlefield and easy to pull off. All you've got to do is keep your armor facing the enemy tank line and not go too far forward or too far back. It's basically like parallel parking. You rotate the chassis of the tank somewhere around 30 degrees, you move forward a little bit, you straighten out, and then you repeat that process until there's enough room. If you see a hostile tank attempting to reinforce enemy lines, be sure to alert the rest of your tank line. This basically works the same as when you're operating alone. You report what type of vehicle it is and how much armor it has to the friendlies around you and to the commander of the tank line. Okay everyone, so now we come to the final segment of this video. Naturally, as the battle continues, some tanks in the line are going to need to withdraw in order to rearm and resupply. With this, the tank line will have to readjust their strategy, especially when some of the heavy hitters like battle tanks leave the area. As a result, the enemy tends to get more aggressive, trying to exploit this new weakness. So your tank line will have to maintain a defensive stance until friendlies re-enter the battlefield. There's no need to try and worry about scoring kills in this scenario. Just focus on surviving. If you have to fall back a little bit, then that's okay, as long as the enemy isn't causing lasting damage to your defenses. When enemy units withdraw from the battlefield, and your tank line is still at an ideal strength, then this is your opportunity to go on the offensive. From here, your tank line would take an aggressive stance, trying to score kills and deal damage to the enemy's defenses. There is also a second reason that tanks withdraw from the battlefield. and that is when night falls. At night, most tanks withdraw from the battlefield because their vision is greatly reduced. They can't see much, so they can't really do much. So most tankers take this time to make the long drive back to the nearest garage to get their armor repaired. For this scenario, we're going to say that your armor was still mostly intact, so you decided to stay on the front. From here, you'll need to do two things. The first, if necessary, is to quickly resupply. The second is that you and the remaining tanks in the line are to tighten formation and maintain a defensive stance. At night, even if the enemy tank line isn't present, you'll be at constant risk of being attacked by enemy infantry. Enemy infantry knows that you can't see them at night, so they'll be much more bolder and much more aggressive in their attacks against you. So at night, always be on high alert. Now, I know what you're thinking. If operating at night is so risky, then why bother staying at the front? Well, the answer is simple. The presence of some friendly armor support is still greatly needed. Your presence can still mean the difference between victory and defeat. Things are a lot harder without armor support, just ask any infantryman. Nevertheless, despite your reduced role at night, you're still greatly needed. So just keep in mind that whenever night falls, someone still has to stay behind and support the front. Not everyone can go back and repair their armor. And with that, we've reached the end of the video. Thank you for watching. Be sure to give a like if you found this video informative, and subscribe if you want to see some more. I do plan on making more guides for Foxhole. I have noticed that there aren't any videos covering anything beyond the infantry basics. So stay tuned for a video covering infantry and how to avoid some rookie mistakes. But for now, good luck and happy hunting.